The family thought to be the most responsible for the formulation of the modern central banking system of the last 300 years are the Rothschild family, the richest family in the world. Their fortune has never been audited, and their funding connections stretch out to many, many dozens of countries. It has been said that at one point, they may have owned half the world's known wealth. Meyer Amschel Bauer was born in 1744 and changed his last name to Rothschild, which means Rothschild, or Red Shield, the family logo for their bank. He built his fortunes aiding Prince William of Hanau's rent-a-troop business, which had supplied Britain with many soldiers to fight against the rebelling American colonists. Having 5 sons and 5 daughters, Rothschild sent his 5 sons to establish House of Rothschild's merchant banks in 5 different countries. Son Amschel was placed in charge of the branch in Berlin. Son Salomon was sent over to the Vienna branch. Jacob went to Paris, France, and Karl opened up the Rothschild Bank in Naples. The headquarters of the House of Rothschild was, and is, in London, which was headed by Nathan Rothschild, the third of the 5 sons. In 1815's Battle of Waterloo, Napoleon was making his last stand against the British alliance headed by Lord Wellington. The Rothschild family financed an intelligence network of continent-wide couriers and messengers who were able to inform Nathan Rothschild, now the head of the British arm of the Rothschild banking enterprise, at least 20 hours before even the government knew that Napoleon had lost Waterloo to the Brits. Rothschild started dramatically dumping his stocks, which spread the false rumor that Napoleon had won the battle. People sold in droves, sending prices down to a fraction of their worth. Rothschild easily bought up the vast majority of companies before the end of the day, and with the truth revealed the next day of Napoleon's defeat, Rothschild's new holdings massively multiplied in value, making him unquestionably the richest man in Britain. Funding both sides of wars has turned out to be a major way of making massive profit, and so throughout the years, most, if not all, major wars have been funded by large banking houses like the Rothschilds, which control the central banks that issue currency and lend it to governments. The more the government borrows from the private central bankers, the more interest they have to pay back, and the higher the taxes are for their citizens. You can borrow money to make weapons, borrow money to transport and equip soldiers, borrow money to attack, borrow money to give to your friends to rebuild what you've destroyed, borrow money to make the public think that this is all in their best interest. And don't forget to skim huge amounts of kickbacks off the top along the way. Towards the end of the 1800s, and after the many wars in Europe, most of the countries were bankrupt and in permanent debt to the banksters. Only in the burgeoning United States, which was completely self-sufficient, was new wealth emerging, and the banksters sought to extract and exploit this in a new opportunity. They would take control of the power to print money away from the people and put it into their own greedy hands.
You know, they're told something from birth and then that's all there is, and they don't want to think or question outside that.
It's always been about property or plunder, and it's easier to plunder than to work for property because you have to labor.
First, I mean, when you talk about conspiracy is a guy and another guy, or, you know, 2 people talking about something in some way that they're going to take advantage of these other people. That goes on. That's business. That's not even conspiracy. Business goes on all the time, right? If they do it at a profit and it falls within these rules, it's no longer conspiracy. You know, it's only conspiracy when what they do falls outside of those rules.
Banking was conceived in iniquity and was born in sin. The bankers own the earth. Take it away from them, but leave them the power to create deposits, and with the flick of a pen, they will create enough deposits to buy it back again. However, take it away from them, and all the great fortunes like mine will disappear. And they ought to disappear, for this would be a happier and better world to live in. But if you wish to remain the slaves of bankers and pay the cost of your own slavery, let them continue to create deposits.
I know I could be wrong, but the most plausible explanation for me is that modern society is a fraud which spawns frauds like communism, feminism, Zionism, the war on terror, 9/11. I mean, our whole society is just rife with hoax and fraud because it's all based, they're all being promoted by the central bankers who have to protect the central fraud, which is our government can't create cash. That's the fraud. Our government and we as citizens, we don't have control over our own collective credit, our national credit. We have to appeal to a private central banking cartel based in England to get them to lend us money, which they create out of nothing based on our ability to repay it.
I think what it is they seize power over you. It's about who is master over you and whether or not they get you to spend a large part of your life living in a manner that allows them benefit without having to do much work. Essentially, they have control over you, and it's about whether or not you want them to have control and whether or not you are going to grow spiritually in order to deny them that control.
The film Money as Debt takes an in-depth look to explain exactly how our money in modern society works. But a simple explanation is as follows. In almost every country in the world, the government no longer prints the majority, if any, of the money for citizens to use. That privilege has been usurped by the central banking cartels, who print the money out of thin air, loan it to the government at interest, but never print enough money to cover the interest, thus ensuring a perpetual debt that can never be repaid, but instead gets only deeper and larger. This is where we get our unending national debt. Many leaders in history have resisted the attempts by central bankers to remove the power of money printing from the people, including Presidents Andrew Jackson and Abraham Lincoln.
In his era, he was the leading opponent of the privately owned central bank. Well, what happened to him was an assassin who was connected to international bankers, it was later found out, got right up to Jackson, stuck 2 pistols in his belly, fired both at the same time, both misfired. Jackson was saved.
President John Kennedy had planned to shut down the Federal Reserve and start issuing silver-backed U.S. notes, but sadly was assassinated as well.
The same thing went for John Kennedy, that he was planning to reintroduce the U.S. notes rather than Federal Reserve notes.
So they're getting interest, and I'm not sure if they're getting the principal, but they're certainly getting the interest for nothing, because they're creating this money out of nothing. And as the homeless man's dog thought, I can do this myself. You know, we can print our own currency.
Money used to be backed by precious metals such as gold, but since the Nixon administration, that standard no longer applies, and money is now worth only the paper it's printed on. The cause of many of the challenges we face in North America today were solidified in 1913 with the creation of the Federal Reserve System of issuing money for the United States. The films The Money Masters and America, Freedom to Fascism, as well as G. Edward Griffin's book The Creature from Jekyll Island, discuss in detail the history of how a small group of men, all banking leaders and politicians with banking interests, gathered in secret on J.P. Morgan's Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia in 1908 to plot the creation of the Federal Reserve System.
The refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of money manipulators was probably the main cause of the revolution.
The reason that the War of Independence happened in the United States was because the colonies were printing their own money based upon their ability to perform work. So what happened was they were prospering because they were printing debt-free money of extreme value that the people used and wanted to use as currency, so they were prospering and growing. This scared England, and they banned it and said, no, you only can take money from us and borrow it at interest, putting them into debt. And that was the fundamental reason for their revolution.
After the Great Money Panic of 1907, which some say was precipitated and caused purposely by the banking interests,